All right, all right. It looks like we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the lab. Today we have the honors and privilege to have a really good friend, Dan Rochon. And the reason we're bringing him today, he's the author of a recently written book called The Real Estate Evolution. And we wanted to bring him on today because he has a very unique perspective in business and he has a really great story to tell. So we wanted to bring him on today, tell us a little bit about himself and the book that he just wrote. And maybe we can get some lessons out of this. So Dan, welcome.
Thanks, Eric. Hello, Drew. Hello, Tyler.
What up, Dan? How you doing, man?
I'm well. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dan.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for coming.
So, you've had a chance to meet a good friend, Drew and Tyler. And we were talking about this morning about the book you just wrote. And as we look in the book, there's a lot of great principles that a lot of business owners can use. But before we get started with some of the things that you wrote in the book, tell us a little bit about how you went about deciding to write this book.
How I decided to write the book. So I guess because I failed in business, and that caused me to want to dictate all the journey. So about a year and a half ago, I had sold a business of mine and did so from a place of not being able to be profitable and succeeding in the manner that we intended. And that was a real estate brokerage. And when I sold that, I, took some time off. I met with a mentor of mine, and he had encouraged for me to take the experience that I had through the journey and to write it. And so originally I was not considering to write a book. I thought I was writing some ebooks. I wrote a curriculum. I taught it about 5 or 6 times. It was a 3-hour class. And then about the 6th time I had it videotaped and transcribed, and I started to revise the transcription. And then a couple of months into that, I realized that I had a project on my hands. And so I felt that it was my responsibility to dictate, the journey. And when I say I failed in business, failure is probably not a correct word, because I don't really believe in failure. I believe in opportunities to grow, and I had a huge opportunity to grow, and so that's what I put the book together as.
I think we completely agree with that. I think that failure or success doesn't define us, right? It all happens in a season of our lives, and ultimately we decide whether that's going to define us or not. So the thought is really that everything that we do is a lesson learned. So it's a great view to have, right? You were able to capture all your lessons learned throughout this book, and through those lessons now you're able to contribute by publishing a book that I believe has some insightful things that real estate professionals and business owners can also take and utilize on the day-to-day operations, right? So that's great. Now tell us a little bit about your background. Like, where do you come from? Like, who's Dan Rochon? Like, how do we get to know you a little better?
And why does he have a better beard than any of us?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's for sure.
This is the in-process Corona beard, and it's sort of like when you go to the playoffs, you say, I'm not shaving until we win. I'm not shaving until I go back to work in the real world. So I may have that ZZ Top thing going on. So Eric, I was a professional waiter before I got into the real estate sales business, and I had done that for years and years and years. So except for being in the military for 4 years, that was my career. And so I was getting into my early 30s and understood that I didn't want to be a 50-year-old waiter. And I knew that I had this ambition to be a business owner, to make a difference in the world, to help people, and to contribute value. I couldn't see the way forward. When I was sitting there waiting tables every night, and I was making decent money. I was making good money, but, I was like, I had these velvet handcuffs on. I just could not find my way. I wanted to have some significance and meaning in my life. And so I started looking at a bunch of different business opportunities. One that I looked at Five Guys, I looked at Marvelous Markets, all kinds of things. And I realized I needed, way more money to get into that than what I had. And so I saw this opportunity as a real estate salesperson that I could spend a couple $1,000s, get a 60-hour curriculum, and get my sales license. And so that was the beginning of my, how I got into real estate sales.
That's awesome, man. The whole thing is that we all have a journey, and somehow, some way, we'll find a path and whatever it is that our passion is in. And I have the privilege of knowing you, and I do know that you do enjoy helping people. So that's a great thing to share. So tell me, how long did it actually tell you to create the content for this book? Because I know it wasn't just an overnighter. I think that you've been collecting information for a while, and there was some thinking involved in this. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
47 years, 156 days, and a few hours.
Outstanding. Well, yeah, I know that. Listen, I know this for a fact, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw it out there. I know that some of us are still learning to write English, so there's something that you had to do in order to put this information together. So tell us a little bit about that process, because I know you just slap it on a piece of paper. There was some type of science behind this. So.
Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you a little bit. So I got my real estate license. I think it's important to sort of know a little bit of the journey from that point, and I'll give you just a little brief of that, and then I'll tell you how I got to the book and how I learned to write the book. So when I got my license, it was 2008, and I struggled early on in business. It took me about 6 months or so to close my first deal, and I remember I talked to my boss at the time, and she was encouraging me. So remember, real estate sales is, it's a journey that you don't make a paycheck unless if you make a sale. So I had 6 months with no income. Finally had my first sale, and my broker was encouraging me to, continue taking the actions. And I remember I was getting ready to pay my mortgage on a credit card, and, it didn't feel so great. So fast forward about a year and a half, or about a year after that conversation I had with my broker, I had bought the brokerage that I worked for. So that was a year and a half of being licensed as a sales agent. And then by my third year in business, myself and my wife Tracy and one assistant sold 109 transactions in my third year in business. So that was sort of like the beginning of my business. And then simultaneous to that, so now at this point I've got two businesses, right? I've got the brokerage, and I've got the sales team. And through the next 10 years, I'm chasing both those rabbits, and, it was challenging. So when I sold the brokerage a year and a half ago, I decided to write the book. I realized that I didn't necessarily it was hard for me to write. It took me about 13 months, and I wrote at least 3 hours a day, every single day. Cause I remember I saw this presentation by John Maxwell, who's a famous author and inspirational coach. And I remember I heard Mr. Maxwell say that when he's writing, his rule of thumb is, I'm just going to write every single day. If it's Christmas, I'm writing. If it's New Year's, I'm writing, even if it's just 5 minutes. And I remember that stuck in my head the entire 13 months. So I averaged out about 3 hours a day, but I didn't take a day off. And it would sometimes take me about 8 hours just to write like 3/4 of a page, which seems like really, really brutal. But the brutal part is when you go to edit it, and then you got to crumble that page up and throw it out. That's what was actually brutal about it. So that was a little bit about the process.
That's awesome, man. That must be really enjoyable too, because through that process, you really got to be purposeful about your thinking, right? And then presenting the information in a way that's actually consumable, right? Because you want to be able to engage your audience and ultimately continue to communicate with them throughout the book. So great on you. Ty, Drew, I know you guys got some questions for Dan. You want to send him down range?
Hey, Dan, first of all, I every once in a while sit down and try to write something, right? And there's a big difference between sitting down and trying to write something and actually putting yourself through that self-critical eye. So first off, hats off to you. Second off, I know in just prior talking to you, you have a huge heart, and you have a huge heart for people and seeing them be successful. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the stuff you've done to just, that you haven't gotten a return on, and just how much of yourself you've put into helping others, and how this book kind of plays into that?
Yeah. So I don't know if I look at return. It's there for sure. I remember I had a life coach one time coaching me, and he asked me what I wanted in my life. And I said, I wanted a relationship with my parents. They, divorced long ago. And he says, well, if you follow my coaching, I guarantee that you'll have a relationship with them. I said, hey, I'm in, coach. And I said, what do I have to do? And he says, well, what does a relationship look like? I said, well, it means like maybe once a week, we would have a meaningful conversation on the telephone. That's a basic start, not like a how's the weather type conversation. And he says, okay, I promise you can have that. All you have to do is call them 5 times a week for the next 1 year, and they'll call you at least once a week for the rest of your life. And I did that. And it was a very easy demonstration to understand that whatever you want, whatever I want in life, it's just, I'm not even so focused on the return. I'm just focused on, if I give more, there's always going to be a return. And so it's like, I'm not suggesting I don't pay attention. I definitely want reciprocal relationships in business. I want to make sure that I'm helping others and they're helping back, but it's really, it's almost an afterthought. And maybe that's a fault. I don't know. Maybe I should be more critical to look at that.
It's really one of the things that I love about you. And I know how much training and coaching you've done that you haven't expected an investment for. And even some of the stuff you're doing in response to the COVID, helping people out. So for somebody else that's a business owner or that's doing that, what would you tell them about just with what you're talking about, how much they need to put themselves out there and to be part of helping and part of the community and part of helping others be the best they can be?
Yeah, I'll give you a specific example of that. But before I do that, I think it just starts with being vulnerable, right? I think and being authentic as well, right? So as a business owner, I've learned that it's just like, take the mask down, just be who the hell you are, and whoever you are, that's it, right? I'll give you a specific actionable. And this is like a win-win-win thing that we're doing on May 8th, which is coming up, or if you're watching this as a rewind, maybe it's past. But on May 8th, we're hosting an event called May Day. And what May Day is I've already raised, as of this morning, $1,425 in the last 6 days that we are using to buy some things to raffle off on this coming Friday. And then we're actually buying the things, and then the money that we have there, we're going to donate that to business owners that can't work right now. So we're talking people that are like barbers, people that are massage therapists, restaurant workers, that type of thing. Because I come from a restaurant working background, and that's really where I had the original idea. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have our entire database, well, not the entire database, but a lot. We intend to have 300 people call in on Friday to be able to enter into the raffle to win the prizes. Right now, we've got some Dr. Dre beats, we've got some massages, we've got an espresso machine, a DNA 23andMe, all kinds of really cool gifts. And so we're going to have people call in on Friday to enter to that raffle. The money that we raise is going to go to business owners, and I intend that we find business opportunities through this venture when we have those conversations on Friday. So that's the win-win-win. And, that's where I think that we have to be creative as business owners. We have to be mindful. We have to be empathetic. We have to help each other. But there's no reason why we can't feed our own business as we do that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%, especially now when our physical ability to connect with people is taken away. So, we've had to do a huge shift to have now virtual-based businesses and really be able to connect to people at a deeper level. So that's ingenious. That's a great idea. We might have to take notes. That's actually something that a lot of businesses can do, to connect with people at a deeper level. So great on you. So listen, so I know you, the book is written now, and there are some lessons in that book. As I was reading through it, that, maybe business owners out there right now can really digest and utilize on the day-to-day operations. So I would say to you, what were some of the things in the book that you would recommend people to go and read that could be useful for them right now? I was intrigued by the social media campaigns and some of the things that social media, but please do share.
Yeah. So for social media specifically, and there's 10 steps that I described in the book, which any business owner can be able to go through. My daughter's joining us right now. She's actually bringing in my
Oh, welcome too.
Right? They're saying welcome, Mag.
She's welcome too. She can say hi.
You see that?
Come on, say hi to everybody.
That's a business owner's daughter right there, bringing me my business expense report right here. That's pretty awesome. Thank you, sweetie. So the social media. So it would be taking it with a plan. I think that for anything to work, whether it be social media, Facebook, any other marketing campaign, is you have to approach it with a plan. The other piece of it is that if it's going to be something that's going to cost you money, my rule of thumb is we have an 18-month rule of reserves that if I want to do a campaign, let's just call it $100 a month, just make it real simple. That means I have to have $1,800 in a marketing bank account that's only earmarked for marketing. And I only spend $100 of that $1,800 on the campaign, knowing that it's going to take me that long to be able to start getting a return. Well, I'll start getting a return earlier, but to optimize the return. Now, $100 probably is not going to do much for a business, right? But that's just for a demonstration. If I want to increase, let's say I wanted to double the efforts, then what I can directly correlate to the return on that investment, invest it back into the marketing budget, and then reallocate to say, okay, if I got $3,600, now I can spend $200, and that's the limit of what I can spend each month. And so we make a rule that we take 10% of the gross revenue that we earn, and 10% of that gross revenue goes towards our lead generation. Now, some of that actually goes to inside sales staff to be able to pay their salaries, right? But the rest of that goes to those types of market initiatives. So that I go through that in the book, pretty extensively. And as I mentioned, it's 10 steps. I would say, Eric, the one step that I would recommend that everybody take a look at, just because if you're listening to this, you're a human being, is the section about flourish. And that's about understanding that wherever we are, whether we're business people or not, or whatever, salespeople, it's about being the very best version of ourselves. And I give you practical tips on how to do that in the book. And it's about when we know that we are giving it all for ourselves, and nobody's perfect, but we're intent. And I give you actionable things like, who you surround yourself with, books to read, meditation, affirmations. This is all things that can impact your programming, which are going to lead to your thoughts, which lead to your feelings, your actions, your results back to your program. And that's a closed loop of action. And it's a hack to be able to get into this closed loop that drives results. And so I would really say looking at the flourishing piece of it for any business owner, because if you're not healthy and you're a business leader, your organization is not going to be healthy. And when I say healthy, I mean spiritually healthy, mentally healthy. Maybe even physically healthy. You could probably be physically ill and be much more powerful as long as you're emotionally healthy. I think that's really the basis of foundation.
That's a whole balancing act of, just being a human being, right? It's never going to be perfect.
Nah.
And we all do have to look at those aspects of our life in order to be effective, not only for ourselves, but for the people we lead, which leads to another question that we had for you. And is obviously the amount of success that you have achieved has not happened alone, right? So
No.
My question to you is, looking from an organizational perspective, how many people do you have that you work with? I know that you build a business virtually, and this change hasn't really, with COVID, hasn't affected you as much as it has affected others. So tell us a little bit about your team and how you have been able to build a successful business through virtual help.
Yeah, I've got 14 people on my team right now in my business, and of those 14 people, 10 of them are 8,000 miles away from me. And that component, so if you look at a business, you're going to break a business, and this is any business, you're going to break it down into 3 sections. You're going to break it down into getting business. We call that lead generation. You're going to break it down to servicing the business. We call that the operations. And then you're going to break it down into sales, right? So lead generation is different than sales because you got to sort of like set it up before you knock it down. And so in my business, I've got the operations department. We've got 10 people in that, which includes marketing, administration, et cetera. And that's that's a solid group of people, solid team of people, because I've got a bench there, right? So one of the things that I've learned in business is if you don't have a bench, you're not sustainable, right? So even if you got that A player, like every one of you, you're an A player, right? And if there's only one of you in the organization, well, that's the truth, right? If there's only one Eric Quadros in the organization, that organization is at risk, right? Because you need a Drew and a Tyler right behind Eric, so that when Eric grows into another opportunity, then one of the two of them can step into that role and you have a sustainable business. And that's where I am right now in my operations crew, because I've got Julene, who's our director of operations, But guess what? I've got two people right now that it could be probably either one of them when Julene grows out of that. And she's going to grow out of that. We had a conversation yesterday, and we have a goal in 10 months' time. She and I are going to start a company training virtual assistants in the Philippines. And we have a clear pathway of here's how we get to that. And a part of that pathway is replacing yourself and making sure that there's 3 people behind that can replace your replacement. And that's a part of that plan.
Outstanding. Drew, you got any questions, man?
Oh, well, I did. Yeah. Dan, I was listening and talking to you a little bit about your history, right? Are you there?
Yeah, he's there.
I'm here. I was swallowing some coffee while I was listening.
Oh, he got frozen for a second.
I got frozen?
Yeah, I got nervous there. I thought you bailed on me. I thought Eric took up all my time.
I'm so sorry.
So, the restaurant you worked in before you got into your into real estate was the Cap Grill, right?
Yes.
And when you left there and got into real estate, do you remember the exact moment you knew you were in the right spot for you? Do you remember what triggered you to be like, hey, this is the career or what I want to do the rest of my life?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I hadn't thought about this in years. I was in Greenbelt, Maryland, right outside of the NASA little place there. And I was at a Starbucks. And I remember I was there to meet somebody. He didn't show up. And I remember I was reading a book, and it was 7:30 in the morning, which means at the time I lived in Alexandria, Virginia. So I had to be up at maybe 5:30 to get there. And I remember I was reading my book. My appointment didn't show. And I said, that sucks. I said, but then I started thinking, I was like, you know what? But I'm sitting here reading this book, and I'm drinking this coffee, and it's 7:30 in the morning, and I've got complete control over what I decide to do today, right? That is freaking cool. Now, that's not the same as going to the amusement park. It doesn't mean that I can take irresponsible choices, right? But I remember that time, and I would say that's the instance where I'm like, yeah, I will do this the rest of my life. I will never work for another person, not because that's not worthy. I mean, it's certainly worthy, right? It's just because I want to control my destiny. I want to be in a position where I can help others. And I know that this is the platform that I'm going to be able to do that. And I'll never forget that moment. Thanks for reminding me of that, Drew.
That's awesome, Dan. That's awesome.
Hey, so Dan, if you were to describe Dan, the man, in one word, what would it be?
Sexy, baby. That's 2 words.
We might have to run audience for that. Oh, goodness gracious. And we have to edit that out of the video, but it's all good. We're live, so it's too late now.
It's already out there.
It's already out there. It's in the cloud, man. So listen, we're gonna go. Right now, we're going to one of our favorite sections in the interview. Is we have a few questions. We call it rapid fire, and Drew's gonna go ahead and shoot some questions for you. So just be you, man. Well, you already started, so you must well continue.
Thank you.
Yeah, caught me off guard there, Dan. Not what I expected. The one word. All right, so here we go. What's the one thing you've eaten the most during the quarantine?
Yes.
Okay.
Open fridge, insert whatever's in there, and mouth.
What's the one snack food that you won't eat after the quarantine?
No. What's the one where I'll go back. I've been really bad about my diet. That is, you talk about no one's perfect, right? That's been my Achilles heel over these last month and a half for sure. I got my exercise down right, and that was from a suggestion from my friend there, Eric, for me to get a Peloton. And Drew, I know you're on that as well. Tyler, are you on the Peloton?
Well, I'm cheap. He tried today. Eric was like, "Hey, you gonna get a Peloton?" I was like, "Oh, let me look. How many $1,000? How bad do I want to be skinny?" So I'm still working through how bad I want to be skinny. I'll be honest.
I had that same challenge, but I'm grateful that Eric talked me into it. I definitely had that same challenge. But Drew, to go back to your question, I'm going to get back to my vegetables. I would eat for lunch on a daily basis. I would eat 2 or 3 apples and maybe a salad. And it's just eating, lighter foods. That's where I'll get back. And I should get there now. I'm intending to do so. I'm just struggling, man.
Yeah, you have a cheat meal?
Cheat meal. I would say a cheat. This is really bad because I am diabetic. I take insulin to live, and I eat ice cream will get me. I've got a sweet tooth, man, like you wouldn't believe.
Ice cream has been everyone's go-to. What's the last show you binge watched?
I just finished last night episode 156 of The West Wing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie? I'd have to go with Pulp Fiction.
There we go.
Yeah.
Last book you read?
Last book that I read, I'm always reading 3 or 4 books at the same time. Last book that I read,
I hear the author sexy as hell.
Yeah. You remember that you're sexy, but you don't remember the last book you read. Okay.
No, I'm intended to because I'm reading 3 or 4 at the same time. Pretty much all the time. So Extreme Secrets by Russell Brunson. I'm reading that right now. I'm looking right over my desk here. What's this? How Successful People Lead. That's by John Maxwell. And then I also have The Millionaire Real Estate Agent and Shift on my shelf there as well, though I'm not reading those currently, but those are the 4 books that I'm just looking at here.
Go-tos.
There you go. All right, Dan. Well, I would ask you what sport you miss the most, professional sport, but I'm scared you're going to say sexy. So
bring the sexy back, baby.
Yes, no, sexy. Yes, no, there's the speed round. We're done. But thanks.
Now we know.
Now we know.
Hey, Dan, so, we have a great audience out there that's always looking to learn. So what's the best way to get a hold of your book?
Sure.
Real Estate Evolution.
Yeah.
Where do they find it?
It is on Amazon. It will be on Audible, hopefully by the time you watch this, if you're not watching it live. If you are watching it live, check back any moment because it's getting approved. And you can also visit the website, www.therealestateevolution.com.
We'll be sure to post that on
Thank you.
On the live session after we're done so that everyone can access it for those that are listening. So on behalf of the live, my good friend Tyler, Drew, and yours truly, Maps Business Coach, for all the world out there to see and hear, we're here for all of you. If you want to come and join the live, please do come join us. And we want to thank Dan the Man Rochon for coming over here and talking to us about his awesome book. One last time, Real Estate Evolution, for those of you that need it. Go out there, pick it up on Amazon, and learn some great tips and tools that you can utilize to get your business to the next level. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
We'll talk to all of you soon.